Greetings, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for the Indigenous Wisdom for the Earth series. Today, we have some very special guests, Bill Jones of the Pacheedaht First Nation in British Columbia, and Asha and Paula from the Mamas Movement, also in British Columbia, and Clare Dubois, the founder of Tree Sisters. We are meeting today to discuss with these people who are on the front lines to protect the Fairy Creek Forest in British Columbia, which is under threat of being logged into non-existence.
The protest started about the middle of around August last year, and I joined them after a few days when I heard about it. Yeah. And I went up and joined the picket lines, and to save the old growth forest. And it was way out in the back, on top of the mountain, approaching it from behind, and so it was an arduous trip getting there. And then the impasse started as the what we call the Rainforest Flying Squad was formed. RAIN number 4 Rainforest Flying Squad, and they organized a spontaneous group to address the problem of trying to save the old growth. And it's probably a loose, not quite an association, but a conglomerate of people who have come together and are working together to save the old growth. And we wound up with a very, very effective legal team, as we call them, and then also the media team and the supply team and stuff like that. And there's about half a dozen different teams to do with even assigning camping places for the protesters having to spread out due to COVID. So it's quite an undertaking, and it has been working quite well. Like a lot of grassroots groups, we did have problems with, well, I hate to call it that, but mentally ill people joining the forces and sort of disrupting everything, fighting with everybody. But we managed to get past that and stabilize the group. And now it's quite well organized and cooperative, I guess I could call it, and they have, I think, enough money, but not enough to buy the forest. There's 3 or 4 other places. There's one called the Walbrand, where I was involved with directly trying to save the Walbrand ecosystem old growth, WALBRAN. And then also we extended to another place called the Eden Grove, Eden Grove beauty place, I guess you could call it. It's high above a very steep canyon, and it has lots of culturally modified trees there. And it's a pristine place. So a lot of these places are really exceptional. They have no man has ever gone, I like to say. But there are, women were there, and we don't know when, hundreds of years ago, because the yellow cedar has a quality of bark that peels off the tree about 20 or 30 feet in the spring. And what happened was we came across the yellow cedar grove, and it displayed the scar of the yellow cedar bark peeled off. The bark grew over it and repaired itself. So that's hundreds of years. And so we were connected to the past and maybe the future also there. And then describing my personal experience with the Fairy Lake watershed, which is our focus right now. In the 80s, I used to go up there to pray and meditate, and incidentally, maybe hunt a bit too. And I would make a fire and pray and meditate up there, and it was quite a peaceful experience, I think. But there's some odd things that happened up in the forest. One time when I was up there, I made a fire in an abandoned gravel pit, and it was going, and I was sitting there watching, overlooking the Juan de Fuca Strait, where we could see all the way down to La Push, Washington. It's quite a view up there. So so it was quite a popular place. And then I wound up getting involved with the Save the Old Growth people, and I found out that we had quite a bit in common in our primordial selves. Some of the people who joined us came from London, of all things, and Toronto, and Winnipeg, all over the States. And these were people who seemed to have a yearning for something original. And then my best conjecture was the fact that these people are looking for their sensitivity, their awareness of the world, where they can let things in with all their senses. But modern civilization with the Industrial Revolution shifted a lot of the population in Europe, to town. So you became factory workers and desensitized and monitored by a priest, So, but some of these people sort of were or are natural born rebels, and they're not sure why. And I kind of think I understand why, that they're seeking and finding their own primal innocence by regaining their sensitivity to the world around them. And these people went up there. Now, here's where I get to percentages. I was involved with it probably since about 1982. I had a heartfelt urge to save what we can, because I knew it was the end of our Grim Reap, big logging company plundering of the land. So I got involved with them, and to describe what happened to me, my village is 60, 80 people. And if I can look upon my village as a microcosm of off the reserve, the provincial government or the Canadian government, I realized that me as a percentage represented what those people who are joining the eco preservation people are, in fact, we're all of the same, I guess you'd call it ilk. We all want to resensitize to ourselves to the earth. And so with me there was just me for about 8 or 10 months, and then sporadically some people joined and faded away. And I do have an honest need at 80 to do what I can to save what's left of the old growth, which brings me to the adversaries. Now, I think a brief description of what happened and how this oppressive system developed is we go back to about 1960. The Department of Indian Affairs came to the reservation, okay? And we were sort of cynical, and my dad was even more cynical. And he said, "What do you want here?" I said, "Well, we can build you your houses." And he said, well, my dad said, "Well, I've built 3 now. I don't think I need any more houses." See, we still had some original independence. Mm-hmm. And then they slowly took over and took the housing away, and then took the fisheries away, took education away, took nearly everything away. And everything went to, you had to go to the band office for any life thing, whether you want to go to school or know what the politics is doing. So that sort of Indian Act, they call it, destructured our how we do it system. And we men are very, very lazy. A lot of men will just, why not? We've got a reserve full of government built houses here now, and they, some of them have destroyed their house 3 or 4 times, and the government simply builds them another one. So it's kind of insane. And then, well, describing that, what is most disturbing to me is the fact that we have an entrenched political oppression system. Okay, about 1980, we'll swing ahead. And they found out that, they're giving us operations money. We didn't know what that was, Yeah. Extra money. Holy shoes. Why not? Free money from the government. And that helped to develop the nepotism on our reserve, because the competing families wanted all that government money flowing their way, mm-hmm. with new houses, new cars, and which it did. And then the logging started to, I call it flubbering out. It was running out of forest. We were at the end of our glory days of logging, I guess we could call it. In 1984, October 14th, 1984, I got laid off from logging, and the personnel manager said, "Bill," well, I asked him, I said, "Well, how long am I going to be off this time?" And he said, "Come back in 300 years, Bill." And then he started laughing insanely, because he had to axe 384 men from the logging operation at that time, and I guess it got him a little bit mentally disturbed. So that set up my focus on, well, what's left. And I was aware there's not much. And then there was an odd thing. I'll jump to about a month or more ago now. How this struck. What happened was I happened upon an article where the band council and the pretender chief said, "Oh, we want all non-First Nations out of our territory, and we want to manage the forest ourselves." And that is sort of a pie in the sky thing, because virtually the band council has no legal control over anything except the 300 acres that is our band reservation. So it was sort of hollow threats, go away, white man, sort of, we're taking over. And that sort of offended me, because one, the pretender chief was sort of, you've had them in Great Britain umpteen times, I guess, where a pretender king will say, "I'm king," and there'd be the wars. And this is much the same on a very minor scale. So anyway, the pretender chief and the elected chief council made a statement that we're managing the forest ourselves. We want all white guys to go away. And virtually what is amounted to my estimation, he said, "Go away, leave our happy hunting ground." Now, that gives me a opportunity to briefly establish or explain how this oppressive system started to entrench itself. In the early 80s, the band council were first forming, and we'd get into arguments like you do in City Hall, or your village. And finally, they'd call the meeting off. And then they would try to force the people to think what they want, the band council. And then they discovered, if we pick a fight, when they're not doing what we want, we can cancel the meeting. So they did that about half a dozen times. And then they complained to the federal government, our overseers in the Indian Act, said, "Well, you can't get good meetings, no, our membership's too unruly." Well, govern by order in council, and we'll monitor what you do. Now, that doesn't seem like a potent and can be maybe fair. However, there's some odd things that happened. Treaty was now coming into being, I guess you could call it. And we're doing treaty process, and for land and forests and stuff like that. And also, so the government said, "Oh, we can get what we want," the federal government, "if we just manipulate the nepotic leadership of the band councils." So since about 1980, the government has been nurturing and supporting the political elite here that started singing their tune very nicely, because it turns out that these political science students started getting good at what they were training to do, research. And finally, one girl dug up, said, "The government has been rewarding the band councils after the band councils got the government what they wanted. This block of land, or this called that, or something like that, as far as land ownership is concerned." So they got the hang of that, and they manipulated the band council, which boxed us into a small corner of the with the treaty, you can see that it's just a farce. But anyway, that's about 1,000 or more pages of, oh boy. Anyway, so where am I? So treaty, and then the provincial government was a friend of our chief, and he said, "Oh, we can get Jeff to do what we want. All we have to do is say, hey, there'll be some reward money after the we get this done, and we'll come, we'll get your health program through, and you can take a good bonus off the health program." And sure, why not? So that's two governments made a or entrenched the order in council systems of government on reservation. And then Teal Jones, the logging outfit, the opponents who want to log all the last of the old growth, they discovered this. And then they started patronizing our politicians. So we wound up with the federal government, the provincial government, the logging interests, and even the fisheries interests, all lobbying and patronizing our political elite. And it's sort of sad. We have to network, I guess you could call it that. We have to learn to communicate with others who are equally concerned about our old growth. I'm sure there's places in the eastern seaboard and of the States, and probably in Great Britain too, where there's some nifty places that we should keep forever. And that is crucial, I think, because governments have a knack of separating and isolating people, like our bands here. They set up a system where they're the boss by a order in council of government, and then they have a manageable system. They can get what they want off the political elite, and that is the main problem. And how to address that. And I think it's going to be fiercely defended by the federal and provincial government, because they, when you got a grip on a people, you usually don't want to let it go.
Are you able to hear me, Bill? I'm just aware that so many people listening will not understand, as I don't, the reality of what of the land that you're trying to protect is actually Indigenous territory. There is great ignorance around what the government has done to your people, and ignorance around what it even means to be moved into reservations, where your territory actually is, what is your spiritual responsibility to the land versus where you've been put and how you've been treated, and where the government have rights or where they don't have rights, but they're asserting rights. Because people want to understand how they can help, but they don't fully understand. They don't fully understand. We all understand that old growth forests should not be logged. We all understand that. We all understand that the forest is sacred to everyone, and it's deeply sacred to the First Nations people who live there.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, darn. I don't know how to turn the phones off. how to educate people. It's very pondersome. How do you disentrench a installed person who's doing your will? You know, how do you dismantle the oppressive system without maybe starting a war? I don't know. And it's a very pervasive problem because the Indian Act covers all of Canada, and there's some odd things that are happening. The voting base of the small rural places, the First Nations are going to have the majority in about 25 or 30 years. And that put all the farmers at a worrisome position where the First Nations are going to elect who they want. And then also the Indian Act has so thoroughly destroyed our family system that 90% of the people in the government's care, the children in, I forgot what they call it, adopted and put in foster homes and whatnot, they're
Assimilation, I believe it's called.
90%, which means that there's going to be and is a huge problem for the government now, and they're starting to, I think, get worried because how do we cover a corrupt system and yet solve our problems? And my personal view is that it's an insolvable problem. You know, how do you dismantle oppression, and how do you re-educate people to be a person, to resensitize them to be themselves, which 150 years or so we've been taught not to be. Messy and government installed system, and I think it didn't get here by a plan. It was just an expediently adopted thing. Oh, we can get Jeff to do it. Give him a reward after. You know, why not? He can buy a new whatever, you know. So of all things, one graduate political science student with her group were addressing a Secrecy and Privacy Act to see who gets paid for what on reservations, and they were able to uncover the fact that the government has been setting up programs, and they entice the First Nations leaders who are under their thumb to get this done this way, and then we'll give you the money for that program, and you can have a generous reward. And that is called bribery, isn't it?
Exactly. And can I come in here, Bill, a little bit? Because it's like to see that bribery and then to go into some of the things that you're talking about, like for instance, even the treaty, and in hearing the overview of the situation that I've heard and sat with and listened to, which is that if First Nations are speaking up for protection of land, they're not really called back. They're not really answered. They're not really paid attention to. They're just paying attention to the people who are speaking that will listen to possibly the bribery, more money, and coming in and doing what the government wants, which is cutting the trees. Is that a sort of a correct overview of what you're saying as well? Like, yeah, and the treaty also, there's a place in the treaty where it's stating basically if you speak up because you've agreed in the past, and however they coax the agreement in the past, which what you were talking about earlier, is that if you speak up, you're in trouble basically. It's not okay to speak up. You've already agreed. So this land, basically we can do what we want. And that's what we're going to do, is what the government's basically sort of saying now. Is that true? Or can you talk about that, sort of that gag order that you talk about, that it's like you're not even allowed to speak up even, right? Like that's in the written treaty in a way, right? Can you speak a bit about that?
Yeah. Oh yeah, it's a big can of worms, the
Yeah,
Fairy Lake protest. You know, there's stuff leaking out of it on all sides, and it's difficult for even, I think, the governments and the logging companies are trying to find a safe way to address it without losing face. Because a lot of these people who are at the protest sites are actually, in fact, you know, middle class, upper middle class uh, uh, people who lived in their community, and they have to see these people, you know. And so the superintendent, the foreman who lives in Lake Cowichan, he told me he's rather embarrassed to go out now because all his friends are eco freaks, he calls them, you know.
Mm.
So the education is crucial, but we have to somehow address the lethargy of my people. I know when you get depressed or oppressed,
Right.
it takes a long time to, you know, get out of it, you know. And for me, my Great Depression was from about 1982 till about 91, you know, where I didn't actually, I didn't let myself become aware or resensitized into the way things work. It came to me slowly from about 91 until about 08 or 09, thereabouts, where I realized that these are a part of all ourselves, and our sensitivity, our connection to our great mother is expressed quite endlessly through our forests, particularly the old growth. And so we have to, Grandpa said that, you know, don't cut the trees down, Sonny. You know, I could go on telling you what Grandpa's exhortations to me to not cut our trees down, but I was one in, you know, 300 or 400 loggers around here. Hey, you know, we can't. So I'd be just, you know, slumped to the side. Actually, one man up the coast, we call it, half, 3/4 way up the island, I forgot the name of the town. He said, okay, Sonnies, we don't want logging in our valley. So you go there and picket and stop the trucks. And it worked okay, but all they did was got the cops there and threw those guys in jail. And then they wound up not able to get jobs anywhere, so they had to leave town. So it was a no-win situation in them days. And how to develop well, with these young women, education is crucial. Like I say, the 4 girls who are coming up, they're 24, 25, and if they can be, I don't know what to be called, worked or exhorted into developing a approach to, you know, address these problems, because they're pretty messy. But actually, the my personal involvement is quite simple. It's, you know, in Canada they call it constitutional law, which they have. There's the Canadian Bill of Rights, or whatever it's called. There's the Charter of First Nations Rights, and then there's the UN Charter of our Rights. So the BC government adopted all 3 of them, and they haven't enacted them or put them into
That was
policy.
going to be one of my
So
questions.
they're
Mm.
so they're paying lip service,
And is that, I mean, to
installing
me,
these charter.
Phil, I'm just wondering, I mean, there's so much corruption, there's so much deceit, there's so much confusion.
Mhm.
And, Asher and Paul are also, I'm wondering, the forests are a symbol for so much. They're a symbol for so much. And we don't know whether we're going to be able to save these forests. We're going to do everything we can to save these forests. But it's a moment in which the long-term injustices, the reality of what's happened that has not been known, that has been accepted under, the colonial way of doing things, of suppressing and separating and fracturing and deceiving and stealing and bribing and everything that's gone on. The assimilation of children. I mean, the hideousness that's gone on. It feels like the education needs to be multifaceted, and the education needs to be one of the primary things to help people understand what has happened here, what has happened to the peoples, what has happened to the lands.
Mhm.
And the more people actually understand, because they don't understand, the more they can understand. And if we can focus on that, like getting out, like showing up the government for what they've done, showing up the companies for what they've done, showing up the bribery for what it is. Like, is that happening? Is that level of education
Oh yeah, that was,
happening? Is it happening? Are we able to get that out?
Mm.
yeah. Oh yeah, that would be this graduate girl who did her paper on the benefits of doing what the government says for the political elite was her thesis, I guess they call it, her final paper. So she's quite aware of it, along with half a dozen of her classmates who did this research. So we're learning, and
Thank you so very much for your time, and I really appreciate everything that you've shared with us.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Bill. We're going to be looking for ways to support and looking for ways to help educate and stand with you. So thank you so much for taking the time to be with us. I'm sorry we've taken up so much of your time.
oh boy, between my bad hearing and all the noise around me, I do apologize, ladies.
Please don't worry,
Yeah.
but do go to your next meeting, Bill. Do go to your next meeting and take care of yourself and
Yeah.
take care of your health and I don't know whether you can hear me. Thank you so much for everything that you're doing, and thank you for taking the time with us.
Yeah. Thank you for being
Okay.
here.
Maybe we can meet again.
I hope
But
so.
I'll sure work on recruiting Kathy Code and the 4 young women.
That's
That'll
a
be
good
a
idea. Mhm.
gruesome team.
Yeah. Keep
May
weaving.
I say bye-bye?
Bye-bye, Bill.
Okay.